James 2 verse 24 and Ephesians 2 verses 8 to 9 may seem contradictory at first glance, but they can be reconciled when understood in their respective contexts. Let's look at each verse individually and then consider their broader meanings. James 2 verse 24 NIV says, "You see that a person is considered righteous by what they do and not by faith alone." This verse emphasizes the importance of actions and good works as evidence of genuine faith. James is addressing a context where some people were claiming to have faith but were not demonstrating it through their deeds. He argues that true faith naturally leads to righteous actions. In this context, James is cautioning against a mere intellectual faith without any corresponding works. Ephesians 2 verses 8 to 9 NIV states, "For it is by grace you have been saved, through faith, and this is not from yourselves, it is the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast." This passage highlights that salvation is a gift from God, received through faith in Jesus Christ, and not earned through our own efforts or good works. Paul, the author of Ephesians, is emphasizing that our salvation is entirely dependent on God's grace and not on our own merit. When we examine the broader teachings of the Bible, we find that both faith and works are important aspects of the Christian life, but they have distinct roles. Faith is the means by which we receive God's grace and salvation, as emphasized in Ephesians 2 verses 8 to 9. Works, on the other hand, are the fruit of genuine faith and serve as evidence of our relationship with God, as emphasized in James 2 verse 24. In essence, James and Paul are addressing different aspects of the Christian experience. James focuses on the evidence of true faith through works, while Paul emphasizes the foundational role of faith in receiving God's grace. They are not contradictory but complementary, providing a more complete understanding of the Christian faith. It's important to approach the Bible holistically, considering the entire message of Scripture, and interpreting individual verses in light of the broader context and teachings of the Bible. Let's explore the difference in how James and Paul explain Abraham's faith and righteousness. In James 2 verses 21 to 23, it says, "Was not our father Abraham considered righteous for what he did when he offered his son Isaac on the altar? You see that his faith and his actions were working together, and his faith was made complete by what he did. And the scripture was fulfilled that says, Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness, and he was called God's friend." James emphasizes Abraham's actions as evidence of his faith. He uses the example of Abraham's willingness to offer his son Isaac on the altar, highlighting how his faith was demonstrated through his obedience. According to James, Abraham's faith and actions worked together, and it was through his deeds that his faith was made complete. James then quotes the Old Testament passage, Genesis 15 verse 6, that states that Abraham's belief was credited to him as righteousness. On the other hand, Paul in Romans 4 verses 2 to 5 and Galatians 3 verses 6 to 9 refers to the same passage from Genesis and explains Abraham's righteousness in a slightly different way. In Romans 4 verse 3, Paul states, "What does Scripture say? Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness." Here, Paul emphasizes the act of believing or having faith. He highlights that it was Abraham's trust in God's promises that led to his righteousness, rather than any works or actions he performed. The difference between James and Paul's explanations lies in their respective emphasis. James emphasizes the importance of works as the evidence of genuine faith, using Abraham's obedience as an example. Paul, on the other hand, emphasizes the foundational role of faith in receiving God's righteousness, using Abraham's belief in God's promises as the key factor. It's important to note that James and Paul are not contradicting each other. They are addressing different aspects of the relationship between faith and works. James focuses on the evidence of faith through works, while Paul focuses on the role of faith in receiving God's righteousness. Both aspects are essential in understanding the broader concept of faith and righteousness in the Bible.